Welcome to Good Burger Reviews. My name is John, and I'm here to do a brand new 2025 movie review, and that movie is called VHS Halloween.
Hello? Dude, are you saying this? Where are we?
This movie is starring Rich Baker, Jenna Hogan, and David Hayden. Directed by Alex Ross, Casper Kelly, Paco Plaza, and Anna Slavic. The basic overview: it's a collection of Halloween-themed videotapes unleashed into a series of twisted, blood-soaked tales, turning a trick-or-treat into a struggle for survival. Okay, so this one is definitely starting off as a mixed bag. It is a Halloween anthology style, kind of similar to All Hallows Eve, or released over a while back, a movie called Trick or Treat, where they tell multiple stories within one story. Now, the one thing I liked about Trick or Treat was all the stories connected. This one, it doesn't seem like they're connected. This one really was giving me like an urban legends meets wreck type of atmosphere. And I'm mixed because it's definitely like a found footage, but it's one of those extreme found footage where there's lots of shaky cam, lots of randomness, and you also have multiple stories going on, so it's hard to kind of stick with characters or really identify with characters because the stories are kind of short. Also, I will have to say that I have not really watched the VHS series. I know there's been multiple of them, 1984, 1992. I know they're labeled by year. I flipped one on once and I turned it off because I just couldn't stick with it. Now this one, I'll be honest, it was giving me the vibe after like the second one. Like I was like, am I gonna turn this off? Am I gonna give up on its review? But no, I'm kind of glad that I didn't, because some of the chapters were really decent and some of them obviously were weak enough for me to consider turning off the movie. Now I think where this one stands out is definitely the whole type of urban legend stories they tell. It seems like every one of these stories was connected to an urban legend I heard as a kid. You know, like, did you hear the kid who went trick-or-treating, bit into his candy and got a piece of metal or a needle in his mouth? Or did you hear about the time when you were a kid and you drank soda and you mix it with Pop Rocks and it explodes in your stomach? Stuff like that. And because these stories are fairly extreme and a little bit exaggerated, it is scary. I mean, between all 6 storylines, they all have their very scary moments. When you tell stories in this format, you end up losing decent characters, or maybe decent storytelling, or at least developed storytelling. And I think, what really is a negative for me on this type of movie is, and I feel like some of these found footages and maybe this series to begin with, is it's more of the shock value of it. Like, how disturbing can we get? How gross can some of these images be? Like, how nasty can some of these characters be? There's this one of the stories is about these 2 girls who are trick-or-treating and they somehow get stuck in this haunted house, which is like, they're dressed up as babies, but like everything in the house is like this lady who's kidnapped people who are babies or who are adults, but they're like treated like babies and they act like babies and they seem to be babies. It was just very weird and disturbing. There was definitely some scary moments, but it's also very disturbing moments. And I think when you add that to the shaky cam, it can be a rough watch unless you're really into that stuff. There was another one that was like in all Spanish, and it was harder to follow that one. I mean, there was subtitles, but I guess this main character gets stuck into this like scenario where he's like eating eyes, or he's gouging out eyes and eating eyes. That one was pretty gross and pretty scary, but it was hard to follow because I didn't know what the characters were saying. I think the 2 that I liked the best were towards the end. So like, there was this one set of stories where you have these kids who are also trick-or-treating, and they come up to this porch and it says only take one, and of course they're not going to only take one, and somehow the giant trick-or-treat like little pumpkin sucks them in, and they get sucked into this like demented candy factory where they're actually changing people's parts into candy bars. And I mean, it had some neat parts and some traditional spooks and haunts parts, but it also had this like disturbing part where people are getting chopped up and their parts are being turned into candy bars. I think the other strong one in this one is this one about this dad who seems to be obsessed with Halloween. It seems to be further back in time. Like, what's the other thing about these? Like, they all seem to be at various times. Like, I know the video is called VHS, so I kind of thought all of them would be further back in time. And a lot of these VHS movie installments are dated by year, so I guess those all operate within the year. But this one, you had 77, you had 82, you had 90 something, and then there was more modern ones, like the baby one, they had cell phones. So, I mean, that was a pretty decent thing that we had a variety of times. So it's like an homage to all of the VHS years that they've done in the past. But like I was saying, the one in 77, you have this dad, he's kind of obsessed with Halloween and making Halloween movies, which, I've done that. So, the main guy kind of reminded me a little bit, but his son, who also reminds me of my son, he's like 15 years old, he's so over the Halloween thing and being goofy with his dad during Halloween, but they end up somehow like their little haunted house gets like extremely possessed by like this demon who just does all this crazy stuff. The shock value on that one wasn't as bad as like the candy and the baby one, but it was kind of gross. Like the kills on that one, it seemed to be the most intense with a lot of people dying. And then the other one that was the most intense too, like as far as like extreme, and I think, you know, Terrifier 3, I guess, you know, broke the walls for child deaths to be okay in movies. Well, this has multiple child deaths in one of the segments, because one of the segments takes place in the early to middle 90s, and it's this guy who's running this shop where they take pictures of kids, but like somehow the kids are brought back and all this devilish stuff is happening to them and they get chopped up, and it's this other employee that seems to be behind it, but the main person who runs the shop takes the fall for it, which makes it also really disturbing as well. So I mean, overall I feel like this whole VHS series, especially Halloween VHS, it just has lots of disturbing scenes and disturbing imagery. Some of it is scary, but some of it to me is just shock value, and it leaves me mixed and disappointed in some parts. And I guess the last thing that I'll say is the one segment, which it opens with this segment, it seems to finish with this segment. It seems to be like every time it switches segment, this one segment is kind of has like short installments in between. And it's the one where they're drinking sodas and the sodas like explode and like suck their faces in. And like there's this doctor guy kind of running the experiment, and he's like bossy and he's smoking and he's like totally like late 70s, early 80s type of vibe to that one. Another one, and that one also had little kids in it, where it was just very disturbing, and like what happens in this like test subject room is just really disturbing. But at the end of the day, I do want to get down to business on this one, because I kind of know how I feel about this type of horror movie and this type of format. And the anthology, I think anthologies work better for me when they're not in found footage. I would say this one for me is definitely a veggie burger. At the end of the day, there was just too much shock value and not enough just traditional spooks and haunts for me to really get into it. So I mean, I think you kind of have to know your genre and your subgenres. The people who like found footages, if you really are a fan of movies like Rack or the other VHS installments, there's no reason why you wouldn't like this one. But if you're not a fan of the shaky cam or the found footage, then you'll probably want to skip this one. I feel like this one was a straight to streaming It is on Shudder right now. It is got the Halloween name. We are rolling into Halloween week, so it could be worth a watch. So check it out on Shudder. I hope you guys are having a great Halloween. Enjoy the special Halloween presentation that I will be releasing or may have released already at some point this week. And don't forget to stay scared of those urban legend stories that seem to come true when you're having a really horrific and crazy Halloween night.